Before we get into the aircraft, you need to understand the situation Italy was in. When Mussolini declared war in June 1940, Italy had one of the largest air forces in the world on paper, nearly 2,000 aircraft. But most of them were outdated biplanes left over from the Spanish Civil War. Let us start at the very beginning. The Spanish Civil War legend. Top speed, 223 mph built, 1,212 engine, Fiat A.30 inline. The Fiat CR.32 was Italy's most famous pre-war fighter, and in the 1930s, it was genuinely impressive. It dominated the skies of the Spanish Civil War, earning a fierce reputation. But by 1940, it was a dinosaur. A beautiful, elegant dinosaur with fixed landing gear, an open cockpit, and a maximum speed of 223 miles per hour. The Spitfire was doing 362 mph. The Hurricane was doing 340 mph. The CR.32 was still flying combat missions in WW2, but the pilots knew the truth. This aircraft belonged to a different era. It was a reminder of how far Italy had fallen behind. Some CR.32s fought in North Africa against British forces. A few even survived into 1942. But this was not a fighter anymore. It was the last biplane fighter and the most built Italian aircraft of the war. Top speed, 270 mph built, 1,800 plus nickname, Falco Falcon. Now here is where things get interesting. The Fiat CR.42 Falco was a biplane in 1940, and it was not just still flying, it was being produced in larger numbers than any other Italian fighter during the war. Over 1,800 were built. How was that possible? Because this biplane was exceptional at what it did. Italy's first monoplane with a cockpit problem. Top speed, 293 mph built, 782 nickname, Freccia Arrow. Now we finally get to a monoplane, Italy's very first monoplane fighter to enter service. The Fiat G.50 Freccia had retractable landing gear, a modern design, and decent performance for 1938. It was a real step forward, but it had one strange problem that tells you everything about Italian aviation culture at the time. The first G.50 came with an enclosed cockpit, standard for any modern fighter, but Italian pilots hated it. They were used to open cockpits from their biplane days. They complained it reduced visibility and felt claustrophobic. So what did Italy do? They removed the enclosed canopy and replaced it with a semi-open one. On a modern fighter, in 1939, the G.50 fought over Malta, Finland. Yes, Finland bought some, and in North Africa. It performed reasonably against older British aircraft, but struggled against Hurricanes. It was outclassed, underpowered, and underarmed. A stepping stone. Important, but not the answer Italy needed. The Workhorse more combat sorties than any other Italian fighter. Top speed, 312 mph built, 1,153 nickname, Saetta Lightning Bolt. If the CR.42 was Italy's most produced aircraft, the MC.200 Saetta was its hardest working fighter. It flew more combat sorties than any other Italian aircraft of the war. Every front, North Africa, the Eastern Front, Malta, Greece, the Saetta was everywhere. It was not the fastest. At 312 mph, it was slower than contemporary British and American fighters. But it was tough, maneuverable, and its pilots were good. Over North Africa, the Saetta could actually outmaneuver both the P-40 Warhawk and the early Hurricane. Not faster, but more agile in a turning fight. Italian pilots exploited this constantly. And here is a remarkable fact. A bomb-armed MC.200 sank a British destroyer, HMS Seacough Tobruk, in 1942. A fighter sinking a warship. But the Saetta had the same old Italian problem, a weak radial engine holding back a good airframe. The pilots knew it. The engineers knew it. Something had to change. And that something was about to arrive. The Workhorse more combat sorties than any other Italian fighter. Top speed, 312 mph built, 1,153 nickname, Saetta Lightning Bolt. If the CR.42 was Italy's most produced aircraft, the MC.200 Saetta was its hardest working fighter. It flew more combat sorties than any other Italian aircraft of the war. Every front, North Africa, the Eastern Front, Malta, Greece, the Saetta was everywhere. It was not the fastest. At 312 mph, it was slower than contemporary British and American fighters. But it was tough, maneuverable, and its pilots were good. The biggest disaster in Italian aviation. Top speed. In tests, 304 mph in combat. Could barely fly built. Tilde 150. Every country has that one aircraft. The one that looked great on paper, broke records in testing, and then completely fell apart in real combat. For Italy, that was the Breda Ba.88 Lince, which means lynx. In 1937, the Ba.88 set world speed records for twin-engine aircraft. The Italians were thrilled. They ordered it into production. Then they put weapons on it, and a radio, and military equipment, and the aircraft became so heavy it could barely take off. Performance dropped catastrophically. The Ba.88 was sent to Libya for combat operations in 1940. It was such a failure that the aircraft were sometimes stripped of their engines and used as dummy decoys on airfields to confuse Allied reconnaissance. It never flew combat again. Abandoned in the desert, a world record holder turned into a field decoration. That is the Ba.88 Lince, the improved version that almost made a difference. Top speed, 337 mph built, 237 primary role. Malta operations. After the Re.2000 was rejected, Reggiane did not give up. They took the airframe, fitted it with a German Daimler-Benz DB601 engine, and created the Re.2001 Falco Roman II. This was noticeably better, faster, better armed, more capable at altitude. The Re.2001 was primarily used over Malta during the brutal siege of that island, and it performed respectably. It could engage Spitfires on more equal terms than its predecessors. But there were only 237 built. Too few, spread across too many fronts. A capable aircraft that never reached its potential because Italy simply could not build enough of them. The industrial problem again. Always the industrial problem. The turning point Italy finally catches up. Top speed, 372 mph built. Tilde 1500 nickname. Folgore Thunderbolt. Everything changes here. In 1940, Italy managed to obtain a German Daimler-Benz DB601 engine. Macchi's chief designer, Mario Castoldi, had one idea: put it in the MC.200 airframe. What happened next shocked everyone. The prototype flew on August 10, 1940. It hit 372 miles per hour. That was 60 mph faster than the MC.200 it was based on. The Italian Air Ministry ordered it into production immediately. The Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, one of the most respected aviation institutions in the world, has a Folgore on display and describes it this way. This airplane demonstrated that Italy could design and build fighter aircraft to world-class standards. The fighter bomber nobody remembers. Top speed, 329 mph built, 225 roll. Ground attack / fighter bomber. While the Folgore was the star of Italian air-to-air combat, the Reggiane Re.2002 Ariane, which means Ram, was doing the dirty work. The Re.2002 was a fighter bomber, using a radial engine that limited its top speed, but gave it the power to carry heavy bomb loads. It served in Sicily, Sardinia, and saw action during the Allied invasion of 1943. It was tough, reliable, and effective at ground attack. Not glamorous, not the fastest, but it did its job. The Re.2002 represents the forgotten side of Italian aviation, the workhorses that rarely get credit. The Greyhound, Italy's answer to the P-51. Top speed, 399 mph built. Tilde 260 nickname. Veltro Greyhound. Take the Folgore. Now fit it with the even more powerful Daimler-Benz DB605 engine and add cannon armament. That is the MC.205 Veltro. Nearly 400 miles per hour. 220mm cannons, in addition to machine guns. This was a world-class fighter by any measure. The Veltro could compete with the P-51 Mustang, the Spitfire Roman 9, and the later variants of the Bf-109. It was no longer behind, it was in the same league. Egyptian pilots flew modified Veltros after the war all the way until 1949. The design was that good. But here is the tragedy. Only around 260 were built before Italy's armistice in September 1943, just as Italy was finally building a world-class fighter. The war ended for them. The Veltro arrived at exactly the wrong moment. The aircraft that made the Germans jealous. Top speed, 385 mph built, ~300 nickname, Centauro Centaur. Now we arrive at arguably the greatest Italian fighter of the war, and the one with the most remarkable story. In early 1943, a German evaluation team arrived in Italy to test the new generation of Italian fighters, the so-called Sarai 5 aircraft, against their own Bf-109G and Focke-Wulf 190. The results were completely unexpected. The Fiat G.55 Centauro matched the Bf-109G in speed, outperformed it at high altitude, had better handling, and its armament, 320mm cannons plus 2 machine guns, gave it more firepower than any German fighter of the time. The German evaluator, Oberst Petersen, immediately telegraphed his impressions to Göring. His assessment, the G.55 was the best Axis fighter, better than the German aircraft. Germany actually began planning to produce the G.55 in German factories. Göring himself attended a meeting to discuss it. Think about that. Germany, the country that built the Bf-109, the Fw-190, wanted to build an Italian design instead. The perfect fighter 48 were built. Top speed, 421 mph built, 48 nickname, Sagittario Archer. And here we arrive at the final aircraft. The most advanced, the most capable, the most tragic. The Reggiane Re.2005 Sagittario was, by the measurements of those who flew against it, arguably the finest Italian fighter of the entire war. Top speed of 421 miles per hour. Outstanding high-altitude performance. In official trials against the G.55 and MC.205, the Sagittario was the best dogfighter of the three and the fastest at high altitude. German evaluators rated it excellent. Spitfire Roman 9 pilots who encountered it reported they could not shake it off their tail. It was that maneuverable. 8 Sagittarios were deployed in Sicily during the Allied invasion of 1943. 8 aircraft against the entire Allied air forces. Pilots reported they were exceptional performers, even in those impossible odds. But only 48 were ever built. The Re.2005 was so advanced, so precisely engineered, so aerodynamically refined, that it was extremely difficult and time-consuming to manufacture. Italy in 1943 did not have the industrial capacity to produce it in numbers. The Regia Aeronautica had ordered 750 of them. Not a single one was delivered before the armistice. 48 aircraft. That is all the world ever saw of perhaps Italy's greatest fighter.